started, I just wanted to say what an honor it is for me to be here. I'm bringing you greetings from Atlanta. And this is such a beautiful day, and it's so wonderful to see you all. And I would like to start by first acknowledging the folks who also sponsored this event. And so the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture is Jenny Chu around. Jenny Chu. Jenny? In the house. Could we give you a round of applause, and can I invite you to come and flap the wings of this beautiful sculpture that we have? I know you're a little shy, you weren't expecting it. But for those who did not come early and see, I don't know how long it took you to put this up today. Just 2 days? Just 2 days. So we're going to kick this event off with our moving sculpture. And I think they can read more about it. Over here, there's some paperwork about it. So you can learn a little bit more about it. And you're doing a great job. Wonderful job. Thank you very much. Beautiful. All right. So again, we're in a pandemic, so we're trying to be very safe. But I would be remiss if I didn't start this off by saying I'd like to take a moment of silence for all of those impacted, not just by this pandemic, but all of the pandemics that are occurring. So the wars, the health pandemics, racial injustice. So if we could just take a moment of silence together and just give some thought to those who are no longer with us in the physical. So thank you. So in the African tradition, the West African tradition, what we like to do is give a libation. And we like to call out the names of those who have passed on. And so you all, if you have the names of loved ones who are now ancestors and you would like to say it out loud, please feel free. And I'm going to say Ashe, and I invite you to say Ashe as well after we call out some names. So I'm going to start. Walter Young, Ashe. Anyone else? Maxter, Ashe. Just yell out the names. Constantine, Alexandra, Ashe. Anyone else? You can just call out their names. Sharon, Ashe. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. So again, we want to remember all of those who are no longer here in the physical. And again, as a black woman, as an African woman, we also have a tradition that comes directly from Ghana. And it goes a little something like this. When I say Ago, you say Ame. So if I say Ago, Ame. Ago, Ame. Ago, Ame. And what that means is I'm asking you, and this comes from the language of Twi, from Ghana. I'm asking you, are you listening? That's Ago, and Ame is yes, you have my full attention. So Ago, Ago. All right, wonderful. So we have a really exciting lineup for you this evening and for the next 9 days. So we'll be going, or next 8 days, I suppose it is. So we have performers, we have dancers, we have storytellers, we have poets, you name it, we have it here. And the whole purpose of this event this evening is for us to get together in solidarity with one another. Because if this pandemic has taught us nothing else, and we didn't need COVID to teach us, we are all one. We are interdependent on one another. If my neighbor is sick, I need to take care of my neighbor, not just for myself, but just for the greater good. So as Leah mentioned, I come from Morehouse College, and some of you may not have heard of Morehouse. Has anyone heard of Morehouse College before? Oh, wow. So I'm amongst friends then. So Morehouse College, small college in Atlanta, Georgia, and it also happens to be the alma mater for Martin Luther King Jr. And more than 50 years ago, Dr. King said, and this quote always gets me, and some of you may have heard it before, and he talked about this in his very last book. But he said, of all of the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking. We all have a basic human right of health. The land where we grow our food, where we exercise, the water, the seas, the oceans, the rivers. We all have a basic human right to health. But we know that this has been challenged for years and years. So, this isn't new. The ICC report just came out and talked about what's happening with climate change, and a lot of people were shocked. But many of us were not shocked. And what that report said is that we can do some things right now to change what is happening, but we have to act now. And, I know individually many of us are taking responsibility and doing what we need to do, but we also have to put pressure on our leaders and our politicians and the people who represent us, right? And so here in Washington, I know that folks are quite active, and I know it's a very informed community, but reach out to those who may not have as much information. Reach out to those who may think that voting doesn't really matter. Because I can tell you right now, coming from Georgia, where they did not think that we could turn that peach state blue, we did. I go. So we need to act. We need to act, not just locally, but we need to think about acting on a global level as well. Again, the pandemic is hitting all of us very, very hard, but think about what's happening, outside of our borders as well, to the south of us and beyond. So, I think when we're talking about social justice and health, it's not just about, it's not simply about protesting, it's not simply about arguing and getting angry. It is acting, it is voting, it is taking care of one another. That's the most radical act that we can do. Breathing, that's a form of resistance, our breath. So, these are very simple things, but I think it's important to acknowledge. So I've talked a lot, and I think that you guys are still with me. I go? All right, wonderful. So as I said, we have a really great lineup for you this evening, and I'm really excited to hear from these folks that we have. So first up, as Leah mentioned, we are on sacred land right now. This is beautiful land, but it's sacred land. And I want to invite to come up from the Duwamish, Mr. Ken Workman. And we have a couple of other representatives. We have Nancy Sackman and Billy Jane. I don't know where Billy went. I just saw her. But, we were talking earlier, and I just want to say that we have to acknowledge the people who were here first, as we all know. So we're going to hear some stories right now. And Leah, is there anything else? Wonderful. All right, come on up. So we have some gifts that we're going to give.
No, tell her to take it.
Of course. Do you want to say a little bit about what the gifts are?
Okay, which one are we?
So these are sun catchers made from bike parts. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over.
These words, these are the native words that were taken away from us as Duwamish people for so very long. And this is the language that my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Chief Seattle, spoke when he was alive. These are the words that he was speaking in 1851 when he welcomed strangers onto this land. And these are the words that we're allowed to speak again today. That we as Native people can come out and we can talk like this. And so it's my honor to stand before you with my sister, Nancy Sackler, of the Duwamish, and say, this simply means I'm in the state of thanking you for your heart. This word kwedi, it means thank you, and hutch is heart. And so when we say simply means we are thanking you, our friends, for your strength. And so these words that Sinead was talking about, the Sitsiab Sinead, this honorable person, this honorable female person, because our language is gender-centric. And so we recognize a male and a female, a past and a present. We mash all this stuff together in this one cohesive thought. And so our language is very condensed. It sounds very much like the birds. It sounds very much like the whale. It's all of these sounds compressed. And so when you hear me speaking, what's going through my mind is a thought that I attempt to vocalize into the world today. So I am Yayustos. Yayus means work, and Stobs means man. Yayustobs teach da at duat. Kokalahe. Sitsiab kokalahe chat duat. Nancy Sackler, killer whale of the Duwamish. And all turi tuaka deshapat. A long time ago, on this land, Dacho solika hatsatis delpit. Te dwarves, te hitach stolak abs, te hacho abs, kitida te atatita bifsali adishapat. That a long time ago, it really wasn't that long. It was only 170 years ago, when the Duwamish inhabited this twisty, windy river just over the hill to the east of us, from this spot. And down in Renton, the Black River people, Hitach Stolak, Black River, Obsh people, that's where they live. So if you're from this area, Fred Meyer is where that village was. Hatchuabs, Lake Washington people. These are the collective names of the Duwamish. And Du, it means inside, and Mish means people. So when you hear us talking about a people, a Suquamish, a Snohomish, a Duwamish, these are people from a place. And so all you have to do is figure out what the beginning is. And we are the people of this river, this Duwamish, this inside passage. We are the people of the Black River, and we are the people of Lake Washington. And a long time ago, many native people lived here. Today, not so many. Alki Beach, they passed it. That a long time ago, my grandfather stood on the shores of Alki Beach, right over here, and he said, which means come ashore. Come ashore. Onto this land. Come ashore onto this ancient land of the Duwamish. That you are welcome here. And so this is what we continue to do today as Native people. As Duwamish people, we recognize that we are still here, and so we say these very words. So when we say Guiid, this is an invitation to an individual person. So when I would say Guiid, simply means you are welcome here, honorable female person, Sinead. onto this land. But Seattle kind of grew in the last 170 years, and the canoes got bigger. And so we say gwi gwi, which means Lord welcomes. But we as Duwamish people recognize that the world is very small, and so we say gwi gwi hitak bak de atatita bevokite dafstali adesha pad skoiswatute adesha padate duwas. That we say to all the people around the world, it's Skoi, Mother, Earth, Adisha Pad, the Duam, welcome here onto this land of the Duwamish. And so this is your official welcome, that you should know that you are invited and you are welcome here by the native people of this land. And so if you want to know who the Duwamish are, Sitsiaksane referred to that just a minute ago, when in 1855, as my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is getting ready to sign a treaty that gives all of this land known as Seattle away, he said then, at that time, to the governor of the territory, he said, we as people require access to our burial grounds. And I tell you this because it's important that you know this. And then he said, you abandon your dead and you think them powerless, but they're not. And all of these things I'm telling you, these can be fact-checked. I would encourage you to go out and research the speech of Chief Seattle in 1855. 3, he said, the ground is more kind to our feet than to yours. And how, when the lights are out and the streets are empty, they will throng with the ghosts of his people, of the Duwamish people. And finally, and I'll close with this, in this part of this little talk, he said, the hills and the valleys, even the rocks, retain the memory of the people. So when I introduced myself, I said, "Ya used to see da the doa, that I am great grandson of Chief Seattle. Ya used to. But I'm also a retired modern person. I'm retired from a large airplane factory right over here, where I retired out of the Flight Ops Engineering Department as a systems and data analyst. And then I'm retired from the Duwamish tribe as a council member. Then I'm retired as president of the Duwamish Tribal Services, our nonprofit arm. But I would refer to you, and I would ask you, when I'm talking about Chief Seattle and these things that he said, that you look at what he said using the lens of modern science. And when you look at what he said, we require unencumbered access to our burial grounds. And that's because we know that our people are buried in these hills, these 7 hills of Seattle. For thousands and thousands and thousands of years we have lived and died here. And we know that as grandma and grandpa and aunties and uncles pass, all of that material that was then goes down into the ground. And when the spring rains come, all of that stuff that was in the ground goes back up into the trees through this symbiotic relationship between the fungi in the ground and the roots on the trees. So when my grandpa said the dead aren't entirely powerless, they're simply in the trees. And so, Sitsiab, your statement is entirely accurate. It's proven by science that the Duwamish people are all around you. They are in the hills. They are under the streets. They are under the sidewalks. And when he said the ground is more loving to our feet than to yours, I would ask you to think about the elephants of the Serengeti, who talk through their feet using ultra-low frequencies over long distances. One herd can talk to the other and they communicate as to how to navigate. And that we as people do the same thing, because it was only recently that we would walk around here with shoes, because the cells of our feet, which are in direct contact with this earth, are in direct contact with our ancestors that are in the ground, and by extension in the trees. And so the dead aren't entirely powerless. And so when he said the lights, when the lights are out, when streets are empty, they will throng with the ghosts of his people. I would ask you just to go down to Pioneer Square in downtown Seattle, where there are old buildings down there that were constructed in 1909. And in those buildings you will see massive timbers, the support structure. These timbers measure 2 feet by 2 feet, and a simple trig function will tell you that the diameter had to at least be 2.818 feet in diameter. So we know that tree had to be 150 years old to be in the building in 1909. And in those buildings are the ghosts of the Amish. And so when he said that the hills and the valleys and even the rocks retain the memory of his people, I would ask you to think about the construct of West Seattle, this big hill over here, where our scientists, in one of these scientific companies that I work for, our scientists will fly over and measure the gravitational influence of the area around us, where we know dense material has a greater gravitational effect than porous material. And our scientists were describing West Seattle as a big granite rock. And so if you take apart the compound of a granite rock, you'll see that a lot of it is made of silicon. Now we know it's not the same silicon used in a computer wafer chip or a memory chip, but there it is. Everything this man said in 1855, this native person whose people never even made it to the Bronze Age, everything he said was scientifically accurate, and that's where you are today. That these people are all around you, that the world is part of us and we are part of it, and by extension, Argyle is still here. So here, as the Wamish people, when we talk like this, when we say these words, we speak them from our hearts, and by extension from the trees, where the trees continue to work and give us our oxygen, and they give the shade to the streams for the salmon, and they hold the hills from washing away, the root systems do. And so we're all part of this same thing. And so I would like to close by saying a simple word. Thank you. And because Seattle is so diverse, and because there are so many native people from the west side, the west coast here, I would like to start by saying Gunul Chish. Because Gunul Chish is the word of the Tlingit tribe in the southern part of Alaska. And this is their word for thank you. So when the Tlingit people hear their word mentioned here, in this area, they know they are welcome here. And we say Hawa, because the Haida who live 100 miles south of the Tlingit, this is their word. And Deutschkum, the Simpson, who live 100 miles south or east of them, the Haida. So Deutschkum is their word. 300 miles south of them, you run into the Nuu-chah-nulth on Vancouver Island. And by extension, the Makah tribe, over on the northwest corner of the United States, as far as you can get, where they use Tleiko. And the proper pronunciation is Tleiko. So it's a repeat. It means you really mean it when you say thank you. Up on the Canadian border, the Lummi and the Saanich, they use Heiska. And so if you hear Heiska, this is their word. And so all of these people are here. So what I'd like to say to you is thank you in English. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being a part of this celebration here today. Wigwi hidakis ye andisha pada te alok te ras. Oi.